rich heritage. And don't forget to reserve your favorite campsites year-round with...
All right, guys, welcome to K-Talk Radio. You are listening to Utah Home Sweet Home. I am your host, Yoshi Shiraki. Today, we are interviewing Trevor Thompson. Now, Trevor is a good friend of mine, and I'm very excited to interview him because he's done a lot of cool things in real estate. So, what we're going to be going over today is talking about the ins and outs of a real estate transaction from the eyes of a realtor, because Trevor is a realtor. So we'll also be discussing the top questions my guest Trevor has asked by his clients. We're also going to be discussing open houses. We'll also be discussing the nightmare story. Trevor's got a nightmare story. I've got one too, so stay tuned for that. And we're going to also go over the step-by-step of a real estate transaction for those of you who are thinking about buying or selling a home, they've never been through that transaction. We're going to give you what it takes, what goes through it. And then we're going to also talk about fixing and flipping basics 101. Trevor does a lot of fix and flips. He is a big time flipper, and that's why I invited him today, because I love chatting with him. And then we're also going to be touching on working with a realtor who already invests in real estate when you are looking to start investing in real estate as well. So like someone like Trevor or myself, we invest in real estate as well. So let's get started. This is my guest, Trevor Thompson. Trevor has been investing in real estate for... Trevor, how long have you been investing in real estate?
Actively as an investor or involved in investment,
Yes.
It's about 7 years.
7 years.
And first as a property manager, and then for the last 3.5 years more involved on flipping schedules.
Awesome. Okay. And Trevor sits on the board of the Salt Lake Real Estate Investing Association. He has been part of that board for quite some time. How long have you been part of that board?
I think I've been on the board of the Salt Lake Real Estate Investors Association for 4.5 years now.
Okay.
We're mid-year right now, so it's probably about 4.5 years.
Wonderful. I think we sat on the board together. I was on the board for 5 years, and then I think when I left, about the time I was leaving, you were coming in, so we were on the board.
I think we shared that first year, because I remember you there, yeah.
Yes. So, Trevor, let's dive into this, because a lot of the listeners today have never even done a real estate transaction. You know, they're getting ready to buy their first home, or maybe even sell a home. Maybe they inherited the home. And so I'm going to ask you, what are the top 3 questions you are asked by your buyer clients? And if they're different, what are the top 3 questions that you are asked by your seller clients? So if they're different, let's first chat about the top 3 questions you typically get asked by buyer clients. Because the reason I ask this is if it's the top 3 questions you're asked, then and you're asked over and over and over again, they're probably good questions that people should consider asking.
Well, and everybody wants to know. I think for a buyer's side of the transaction, they always want to know, what can I afford? Okay, what areas are good is a question that I get really, really often. And the truth to that one is, I can't tell you. I don't know who you are, what you're comfortable with. We as a policy, we absolutely don't redline areas as far as saying it's a good area, bad area. It's always a depends question. It depends on what you're looking for. What does your lifestyle look like? So we need to learn a lot about each buyer so that we can give them advice. So what can I afford? What is a good area? And where do we begin? Okay. So what can I afford and where do we begin really comes down to the first question. You've got to have a good lender and make sure that you're ready to make a big purchase like that. And usually the first step for any realtor before you go out and look at any houses, other than online, of course, would be what can I afford and am I prepared to make a purchase? Mortgage qualification questions. Other than that, we really need to learn about what their lifestyle is like, what they're looking for, how many bedrooms, how many bathrooms, what type of property. Do you want a condo? Do you want yard work? Do you want a house? Are you looking for 3 acres and a second garage in the backyard for your boat and RV? These are all questions that definitely affect where you want to live.
Awesome. That's great. So those sound like they'd be completely different questions than a seller would have.
Absolutely.
Do you mind sharing what the top 3 questions you typically get asked by your your listing clients?
Okay, so on a listing, everybody wants to know, what is my house worth? And that's a really good question. What is my property worth? I bought it, I don't know how many years ago. We've done these improvements. What is the market doing right now? And that's really what almost every seller universally wants to know. What is it worth right now? Second questions are going to come in like, what can I do to raise the value? What should I do to prepare or clean out or stage my home? And then, with the seller as well, we really need to find out what their goals are individually, because as an agent, we're literally becoming an agent for our client. Our job is to look out for their interests and help them accomplish their goals. And you'd be surprised, not every seller is so worried about getting the most money out of a project. A lot of sellers want it to happen the way that they need to. Maybe they need to sell their house really quickly. Or my best friend sold his house a few years ago in Clearfield. He was moving to Seattle, and he wanted to sell his house, but they did not want to move for 3 months. And the reason for that was they wanted to leave their kids in school until the end of the school year, but we sold his house in April, and we were able to accomplish that goal. We sold his house, he stayed there for 2.5 months after the sale, and we accomplished what he needed. So what are your goals? We need to understand what you're looking to accomplish and the intricacies of it, because it isn't always about that almighty dollar.
Awesome. Wow, that's very cool, Trevor. It's interesting you talked about what is my house worth. I had a friend of mine represent a buyer earlier this year, and they purchased a for sale by owner. In this particular case, the house appraised for $30,000 over what was being asked. So unfortunately, that for sale by owner, I'm not sure exactly where they got their value from, but as you talked about, that's super important, is what is my house worth? Because if you're using, let's just say, internet-based, free to the public, research, oftentimes those aren't too accurate. And in this case, it was $30,000 inaccurate. So I think that's very important, is what is my house worth, and really nailing that value down, if it is about the almighty dollar. But in your particular case, that's a great story where someone could stay in the home for 3 months after it was sold. And what's also nice about that is that gives him the cash, the cash to go out and buy his next house in Seattle without having to worry about his house closing.
Yeah, in fact, he was already living up there with his new job, so he had to get ready, purchase the home, where his wife and children were still here in Utah waiting for the school year to end. So that's kind of one of those scenarios where when we first talked about that, we were like, I don't know if that's going to work, but we'll try.
Yeah.
And there's a lot of things that if you just put your mind to it and you ask for certain things, or you structure a deal a certain way, you can get a lot more than you thought maybe you could. And working with probably a qualified professional who will help ask those questions can really be the ticket to making it happen.
Wonderful. Trevor, one of the questions I get asked often, I don't know if I wouldn't say it's top 3, but it's a question I get a lot when I'm helping clients list a home, sell a home, and that is in regards to open houses. You could ask 3 different agents and get 4 different answers, and none of them are wrong. They're all opinions about open houses. And so I'm always curious to see what other people's opinions are on open houses. Do you mind sharing a little bit about your thoughts on them?
I saw your question on open houses this morning, and my first thought was an open house is only as good as the person who's running the open house. I have known agents who will open the door, put the signs out on the street, sit there in the kitchen and wait for people to come in. And I would say that's not the most effective way to handle an open house. I know other agents, yourself included, that an hour before the open house, they'll go around and knock on the neighbors' doors. They'll send out flyers in advance. They'll do a lot of advertising online on the multiple listing service to bring things in. Other agents will not allow showings until the open house. They call that strategy a grand open house style. So let's say we list the house on a Wednesday. Okay, list the house on a Wednesday, go live, there's beautiful photos, everybody wants to see this house, they're calling their agents, and then imagine that you get told, I'm sorry, you have to wait until the open house. It will be 11 o'clock on Saturday. Okay,
yep.
This strategy is designed to bring about a frenzy of activity all at once. So what we're doing is we're collecting people who want to see the house Wednesday night, Thursday night, Friday night. We're all telling them, no, come at 11 o'clock on Saturday. So then 11 o'clock on Saturday rolls around, we got 8 people lined up at the front door. Okay?
Yep.
8 people who want to see a house, they're well qualified, they're agents there, and they see all the interest in this house. And you know, a lot of times, especially if it's a hot property, we're going to see offers that same day. We're going to see full price offers, above asking price offers. It doesn't work in every market because it depends on how much interest there actually is, but I've seen that strategy work very well also.
I would agree. I think that strategy, well, you being a flipper, you remodel homes, you make them look drop dead gorgeous. I remodel homes, and that strategy works phenomenal on, I think it works well in lots of different situations, but as far as beautifully, freshly remodeled homes, that's the product that everybody wants. And I've seen, you know, open houses that are 2 hours, and in that 2 hours you're getting over 70 people all at the home because they saw it listed on Wednesday, so they knew about it for 3 days, and then Saturday at 11 to 1 they're showing up with the other 70 people who saw it on Wednesday. And like you said, it does drive a frenzy of multiple offers. I'm with you, and I feel it's a great strategy as far as bringing attention and good marketing to a property.
Yeah.
Awesome. So we are going to a commercial break right now, but don't go away, because when we come back, we're going to be talking about nightmare stories. Trevor's got one, I've got one, and you're not going to want to miss it. With smartphones and technology making life a little easier, the Snap Leash has also been designed to make life a little easier for you and your pup. Whether you're on a stroll in the park, or possibly a walk through the city, or maybe even a hike up in the mountains, the Snap Leash is the perfect leash for you. The Snap Leash can easily and conveniently convert into 7 leashes, making the Snap Leash the most convenient leash in the world. What other leash do you know that is 7 leashes in one? With the Snap Leash having appearances on the Today Show in New York City, TV 47 in Dallas, Texas, and ABC4 right here on Midday, Utah, you're definitely going to want to take a peek at what the Snap Leash can do for you and your best friend. Make life a little easier for you and your pup, and visit www.snapleash.com today. All right, well, we are back. You guys are listening to Utah Home Sweet Home on K-Talk Radio. I've got my guest, Trevor Thompson, here. I am Yoshi Shiraki, your host, and it is time for Nightmare Story. Now, we're talking about real estate. So, oftentimes, when you have a nightmare story with real estate, it can be expensive. That's what makes it a nightmare. I've got a couple stories that I can share. I'll share one, but I'm going to let Trevor start with a nightmare story. So, Trevor, if you don't mind, please give us a little story of a nightmare.
Okay. So, I've been in the investing world for over 7 years now. I started out as a property manager, and there's all kinds of problems that can go wrong with rentals. The story I actually chose to go over with you today was a listing from last summer, so it's fairly recent. A property that I listed, my client had already moved out of their home for different health reasons. They moved in with a family member, and they had this house sitting there empty in order to make repairs. And he was just doing little stuff. This wasn't a flip. He was just prepping it, cleaning up, fixing small items in order to get the house ready to sell. Well, I was in between appointments one day, and I got a phone call from just a random guy who was driving around looking at houses, okay? And he called me and said, "Hey, do you have a house in West Valley?" And I'm thinking, well, yeah, I have a couple of houses in West Valley. Which one is it? Well, where are you? Well, actually, I don't know. But there's water pouring out of the front of it. So my challenge in the first place was, okay, there's 2 or 3 properties that I can think of in West Valley right now, but one of them has water. And of course your heart sinks, okay?
Oh, yeah.
Water is a big deal when you're dealing with property, carpet, sheetrock, anything that can get wet and damaged.
Absolutely.
I had to ask him a couple of questions, and he mentioned there was an elementary school down the street, and then it kind of clicked. I was like, oh good, that's not one that I own. Which is terrible to say, right?
Right.
It was one of my listings. But I was able to figure out which one it was. I stopped what I was doing. I drove over there, opened the door, and of course you go straight downstairs and turn off that water valve, that main water valve down in the mechanical room. So we got the water turned off, and there's water and sheetrock dripping all over the basement. It's a split entry home, so you go down 4 steps into the basement level, and it's just hanging almost from one end of the house to the other. So when something like that happens, it feels very scary, and it's expensive and everything like that. But I want to leave this story with there's a lot of hope, okay? Because we got the water shut off. What the problem was the toilet supply valve, the water that feeds the toilet water. That line that feeds the toilet water had popped off the toilet and was just spraying, maybe for as long as a day and a half.
Ooh.
Okay? We stopped the water, we dried it out. My client was able to hire a disaster mitigation company that came in and did the cleanup. Okay?
Okay.
He had good insurance.
Oh, good.
His insurance covered the cost of the disaster cleanup. They hired a contractor. Okay, we were actually under contract to sell this home when the water damage happened, so our buyer canceled. They got totally scared, they canceled. Even though I was telling them, hey, we can fix this, you're going to have a brand new house. They canceled, they walked away, they didn't want to be patient. But the thing is, and this is why there's so much hope, is we were able to get a contractor hired. Within 6 weeks, we had that house put back together, and now it was new. All the wood paneling was gone. The wallpaper was gone. We had fresh sheetrock, fresh paint, fresh carpet, new plumbing lines. It was almost not a full remodel, but it was a remodeled house all downstairs now. So actually, when we got done with the repairs, we relisted the property for about $30,000 more.
That's fantastic.
So my client, not only were all the repairs covered by insurance, we raised the price $30,000, and then we sold it within another 30 days.
Wow.
So is it really a nightmare story?
I was about to ask you, is that a nightmare story, Trevor? That sounds like a happily ever after story.
Yeah, it really does. And that's what's fun about real estate is as a property manager, I remember the call. It was December. We got a call about a fire in one of our tenants' houses.
Oh, wow.
And our first question, of course, is everyone okay? Did anyone die?
Yeah.
They all got out of the house good.
Thank goodness.
Okay? Now, the next question was, how did it start? It was their dryer. They had a gas dryer. The lint trap was full, so clean out your lint traps, guys.
Yes.
The lint trap was full, gas dryer, started a fire. The icing on the cake for that one was that this had been historically a very difficult tenant for us.
Oh.
And because of the fire, they had to move.
Oh, no.
So, again, it ended up being a happy ending.
Yeah, Eviction 101.
Nobody died. We actually got to remodel that house, improve the property a great deal, and we got a new tenant that we enjoyed better.
Very interesting. Very interesting. Okay. Similar to your nightmare story, it's not the one I was going to share. Maybe I'll share both really quickly here. But I had a similar story on one of my houses I was listing, and it was mine. It was a flip, so my heart sunk when I got the call.
Yeah.
But I had a neighbor across the street, really nice lady, give me a call, and she got the number off the for sale sign and said, "Hey, I'm just calling because you've got a glacier coming off your roof down your front door." And what had happened was the swamp cooler never got shut off in the winter, or in the summer to the winter. And then it froze and it broke and it just leaked for overnight. And this was, January maybe. And down the gutter created, I'm not kidding you, a good 3-foot wide glacier and maybe like one foot thick glacier. And had to go over there and knock that thing down. But underneath it was a window well, so we were like really nervous that it was going to come down and bash the window. And so it actually took a lot more work than we thought to just get rid of this huge chunk of ice that was stuck to our house and coming off the roof. And of course, at that point, we had to now fix the swamp cooler. And during the next 4 weeks while this house was being showed, there was this massive, like 12-foot chunk of ice sitting on the front lawn because it hadn't melted away. So people would ask, "What's that big piece of ice on your front lawn?" Well, that was the swamp cooler. But I was chatting with a friend actually not that long ago, where a friend of his had called him and said, "Hey, listen, I am thinking about representing myself as a buyer." And they're not this young lady was not licensed, and she said, "I'm going to represent myself as a buyer, and that way I can offer a little bit less on a property because the seller won't have to pay an agent fee for me, which in theory sounded great. And so she called up a buddy of mine and said, do you have any pointers and tips for me? He's like, yeah, here's a bunch of pointers and tips as you move forward. Get familiar with the, REPC was one of them, which stands for the Real Estate Purchase Contract, which agents here in Utah are supposed to use the Utah State approved REPC. And so he told her to get familiar with that and a bunch of other things. And then off she went on her way to do some shopping for a home. Well, unfortunately, she wasn't as familiar with the REPC as far as timelines. And one of the things that she was, somebody else had shared with her is, if you put a big earnest money deposit, then your offer's stronger. So, which in theory, that sounded great. So she's put $5,000 down, and it was a multiple offer situation. She really wanted this house, and it went under contract. She got her home inspection, which brought up a couple concerns, nothing major, but then she started negotiating with the seller to get those items repaired. Seller said, let me think about it, I'll get back to you. One of the things that were in the contract was her due diligence was 10 days. So she shortened that 10-day, oftentimes, just so people that are listening, due diligence in many cases is anywhere from 10 to 14 days. If you lessen that due diligence period, it typically makes your offer stronger because the seller knows what you're going to do in 10 days versus 14 days, whether you're going to move forward with this based off of your due diligence, move forward with this transaction based off your due diligence or not. So she had made her due diligence 10 days, and the seller took so long getting back to her on if he was going to fix these things, and then long and behold, the seller says, you know what, we have so many other offers behind you, we're not going to fix those things. But what that young lady didn't understand, or realize I should say, was that 10 days had already passed. And so she's like, well, if you're not going to fix those things, I'd like to cancel my contract. And so that seller had an agent that then informed this young lady, you can cancel your contract, but your earnest money's already gone hard. So,
which means non-refundable.
Non-refundable, yes. Thank you, Trevor. So when your earnest money goes hard, it means it's non-refundable. So $5,000 are now non-refundable. She no longer wants this house. And it became a pretty nightmarish situation for this young lady. She ended up getting my friend involved, who was able to help her get half of it. So it was better than nothing, but unfortunately she didn't get it all back. And so the point of that story is if you are selling a home or buying a home, it's very important, it's critical, whether you're working with an agent or not, to know the timelines of the contract, because humans aren't perfect, and you might if your memory is not perfect, you might want to set reminders on your phone. That's what we do. We use a software that sets reminders so that we don't have to worry about remembering. But in this particular case, I don't think it was a lack of forgetting. It's just she just didn't realize she had 10 days in that timeline.
Yeah.
So, on that note, one of the things that I'd like to do is go over the real estate purchase agreement. It's not in front of us, but just kind of off of memory, because for me, I think this is super helpful for people who are out there looking to buy or sell a home to understand what the contract says, what the real estate purchase agreement says. And so, Trevor, we're going to go over some of these things that I've written here on our agenda. And it's kind of just taking a transaction from start to finish as a seller. And if we have some time, we might even do that as a buyer. But for people who are looking to sell their homes, let's go over these steps, because this is going to go over the contract. This is just going to go over each step, even prior to the contract, after the contract. So these are things that you're going to want to get familiar with. So when a seller's getting ready to sell a home, you can see here that one of the first things that I have was something that we've already talked about. Pulling accurate comps to find accurate values. Trevor, how do you go about doing that?
With real estate, Most homes are appraised by the comparison method, which means an appraiser is going to compare to other properties that are similar in style, in location, in size, and all things like that. So as real estate agents, we have access to all of that data through the multiple listing service. So when we search a property by tax ID number or by a previous listing that gives us all the details, the square footage, things like that, we're looking for what is comparable. I always use pictures because not just size, location, and where it's at, is I want to see what the condition of the property is, and there's a lot of flexibility. A property can fluctuate anywhere from 20 to $60,000 or $70,000 purely based on what's inside, if it's been remodeled, if it's in really good condition or not. So we do our best to try and figure out not just what do we think the property will appraise for, but also how much demand is there in the marketplace. Because you can have an A-plus property, but if there's 10 of them available and they're all in the same price range, you want to be the 10th down the list. You want to be the cheapest if they're all very similar, right?
Right.
Okay. But if you're listing a house and there are 2 or 3 homes that are similar in that area and in that price range, you're probably looking very good to get your price. So we pay attention to not only what do we think it will appraise for, also how much competition is there right now. And that's very subjective. A lot of times we're like, oh, let's see what happens here, and then make adjustments as we go. I never like to adjust my price within the first 2 weeks of a listing, because if we've done our job correctly ahead of time and we've prepared correctly, we should be in the right place. So if we're not in the right place, if there's something we missed, we definitely want to make adjustments quickly. And I say make bigger adjustments because it helps you get to a sale sooner rather than going in small grades, price reductions, improvements, whatever you're doing. If you're doing little bits at a time, you're so testing the market. I would rather do it quickly, get activity, get competition, and sell fast.
Wonderful.
Pricing your home correctly is very important.
I totally agree. You know, earlier in my career, one of the things that I did is I took some appraisers out to lunch to understand how they appraise a home. Because at the end of the day, excuse me, if a buyer is going to be utilizing a loan, it doesn't matter how much they're willing to pay for the home if it doesn't appraise for that value. And so I really wanted to understand how appraisers gather that value, how they come up with their decision, because at the end of the day, you know, that appraiser might base things differently from another appraiser. One of the things that they shared with me is there's no hypothetically golden plate that says this is how you do it, right? And so it's subject to their opinion. And so I took a bunch of appraisers out to lunch to kind of gauge and get an idea of how they all come up with their value. And so when I'm meeting with a seller and they're saying how much is my house is worth, oftentimes I'm sharing with them that I'm taking this from an appraiser's point of view. As much as I love your home and would love to list it at a higher price, my price is irrelevant if it doesn't appraise. So absolutely. Okay, thank you, Trevor. So then obviously after the price is determined, then that home gets listed and possibly goes through an open house. And we talked about that earlier in the open house segment where the grand open house is a good strategy. Obviously there's many different ways to do an open house. And then after that, typically showings start to happen. What are some tips that you would share with our listeners in regards to having their home show the best?
Okay, so ideally, we want any property to look like it fell out of a magazine, right?
Yep.
If you go through new home builders, open house properties, model homes, everything's perfect. It's
I love
clean,
that description.
It's light, it's bright. That's what we hope for in all situations. But the truth is not every house is that way. So what things can we do? I say being clean is probably the most important thing you can do if you're looking for the highest price. Okay? And I extend that even to like the mechanical room. If you walk into someone's mechanical room and the furnace is clean and it's dusted off and there's not cobwebs in the corner, any buyer can walk in that room and it will feel like it's more taken care of if it's clean. filters, furnace filters. Light is also really good. Open all those windows and blinds. Have clean windows, because if it's light, it will feel bigger than it is. Do people have to have a brand new kitchen with granite or slate countertops or anything like that? Not always. That's something that can be fixed later on. Paint can be fixed by anybody. It's very cheap to paint a room, whether you're the buyer or the seller. If you're the buyer, you can paint afterwards. So they're very forgiving, okay? But you want it to feel good when people come in. Smells are very important for showings. Smells.
Yes.
Scents, okay?
Not bad sense.
Yeah, and we want it to feel, like home. I always tell my clients, the more time that a buyer can spend in your home, the more comfortable they will feel, and mentally they start to move in, okay? I don't want animals barking in the other room. That's a big detractor. If you've ever shown a house where there's a small dog locked in a kennel or something like that.
Or a big one.
Or let's say you can't go in the backyard because there's a big dog back there, right?
Right.
And these are challenges for sellers. There are ways to overcome them, and sometimes we deal with what we deal with, right?
Yep.
But if we're looking for ideal situation, all of those things will come into play. The more you can do, the more comfortable a buyer will feel in your home, and they'll be willing to pay more.
Wonderful, wonderful. Great, okay, so thank you for those tips on showing. So once you start showing your home, then at some point you're going to receive an offer, right? And this is where, hopefully you're going to start, hopefully you'll receive an offer. And this is where negotiations will start, assuming that they don't offer you exactly what you're asking. So Trevor, do you have any basic tips? And this is so random because offers come in so many shapes and forms. But some just kind of basic advice on negotiating.
Oh, there are entire books written on negotiation.
There sure are.
In 15 seconds, what can I tell you about negotiation? Negotiation is we want to keep as much as we can. We want to instill the feeling that there is competition, even in cases where maybe there isn't sometimes. And I'm thinking from the standpoint of protecting a seller, right? Mm-hmm. So protecting a seller, we want to keep that price as high as possible and negotiate things to, I had a client a couple months ago ask me for a $6,000 price reduction because they found some issues in their home inspection, okay? And these issues to me, as an owner of the property, felt very, very small. But this buyer was sure that there was water damage in a basement bathroom, okay? So I actually went over to the house one day with my sheetrock knife and I cut a hole in the wall.
Yeah.
Pretty big hole, okay? Because for me, it's a difference of $6,000.
Yeah.
So if I walk into the bathroom and I cut a hole and I open it up and I invite them to come back and look behind the wall, guess what? It was dry back there, okay? There was no water behind that wall. So what did on the sheetrock you could see this kind of dripping pattern.
Yeah.
What had happened was that our painter, the painter I hired, okay, our painter had not done a good job of cleaning that wall ahead of time. And it was things like hairspray residue on the wall. But when they painted over it, it looked fine. But after a week, those chemicals and that goo started to kind of just ooze through the paint.
Yes.
Okay, and it made it look like there was a big water stain there.
Got it.
Okay, so number one, I was able to show them it's not water. We actually patched the wall, cleaned all the grease off, and repainted. Okay. All cost to me was probably a few $100s, but it kept $6,000 in our pocket. Okay.
Wonderful.
So as a seller, that's a good example of how do you protect yourself.
Yeah, absolutely, and that's a good example of negotiating repairs.
Absolutely.
Because a lot of people don't realize in a transaction there's so many opportunities to negotiate. You're not just negotiating price, you're negotiating repairs when it comes down that road. Yeah. So, a lot of people ask me, should I fix something before we list the house? And if it's nothing major, oftentimes my advice is only if we get asked to. Don't spend the money now if you don't need to, because you might not get asked to.
Unless it's something important to the home. If you find a water leak, fix it.
Yeah.
If you have electrical problems, fix it.
Exactly.
If your smoke detectors don't work, fix things that are health and safety things.
Yep.
And those typically aren't your most expensive things. But yeah, I would say examine that list of repairs. For me, a red flag is they want a price reduction, but they say, please don't fix anything, we'll fix it afterward, we just want money off the price.
Right.
Well, they probably don't even really care about those repairs, they just want the price lower, right? So
Exactly.
you know, that's why I was like, hold on, there's no water behind that wall, I can show you. But we didn't give up the money.
That's great. That's great. So after you've received an offer, you've done your negotiation, you're now what's called under contract, where you have two parties that have agreed to a contract and you're now under contract, at which point you have timelines. And this is where that young lady in my Nightmare story got bit, in that she did not understand her due diligence timeline was only 10 days. And maybe she understood it at the time that she wrote the contract, because she wrote it herself. But she maybe didn't really understand what it means. And it means that, you know, and on that 10th day, if you have not chose to back out due to your home inspection, due to your due diligence, your earnest money is non-refundable. So you've got due diligence period where you're going to be able to do a home inspection, and we already discussed this, negotiate repairs if you found stuff that you would like repaired due to the home inspection.
Now, I want to interject something here real quick.
Please.
The Utah State purchase contract is really geared toward protection of a buyer. The buyer is the one who's coming in with a big loan to purchase a home, several $100,000, and that contract is written with deadlines that protect them to make sure they want to move through the purchase. When a buyer and seller go under contract, there are not very many ways for a seller to change their mind and get out of it. When the seller accepts a contract, that seller basically has to sit and wait, and they do negotiation and they get to communicate with the buyer, but the seller unilaterally does not normally have the chance to say, never mind, I want out of this deal, like a buyer does.
Thank you for sharing that, Trevor. Great point. All right, so then after, let's assume that everything's gone good at this point and both parties move forward and the due diligence period pass, then typically what is next in line is an appraisal is ordered. Now, Trevor, sometimes the home doesn't appraise, and that can be sometimes good for a seller because sometimes the buyer still has the money to make the difference. I shouldn't say sometimes it's good for a seller. Sometimes the transaction still happens is probably a better way to say it, because the buyer has the difference and the seller's not willing to come down to the appraised value. But oftentimes the buyer does not have that difference. So what typically, if the home doesn't appraise, Trevor, what typically have you seen happen in a transaction?
Well, the appraisal is designed to be a fail-safe so that a lender does not lend more money than they're comfortable with on any specific property. Okay? The lender is the one who orders the appraisal. The lender owns the appraisal, and by default the buyer owns the appraisal, not the seller. Okay? So if the appraisal comes in at value or even above value, a lot of times the seller will not know. All they know is that the purchase price is good, we can move forward, everything's great. If an appraisal comes in low, that's where we're going to have discussion, negotiation. I would say in most cases, whatever that appraisal comes in, it's almost always in the seller's better interest just to meet the appraisal price, because it's the easiest, fastest, it protects the buyer. You know, I have two very close clients that I work with all the time, and they have different thoughts on appraisals. One of my clients tells me, if the appraisal comes in the first time, then we didn't list it high enough. But these are remodel flips, right?
Right.
But then my other client, he feels a lot more like I do. We want easy, fast, quick transactions with no hiccups, because if it happens smoothly and quickly, we get money back in our pocket, right?
Right.
So there's, you know, the appraisal can be negotiated either way, and it is a protection. It's one of those things that has to come in for a buyer and for a lender to move forward with the transaction. Appraisers are not the bad guy, okay?
Yep.
They're following their guidelines, they're following industry standards. Occasionally we see an appraisal that comes in wildly off from what we thought it would be, and I guess in rare cases you can order a second appraisal if it's really that bad. You know, in 15 years, I've probably only seen one or two that are really, that I feel like are really that bad.
Mm-hmm.
Most of the time they're pretty accurate.
I agree
These
with
are
you.
professionals.
Absolutely. Thank you, Trevor, for sharing that. Once the appraisal is complete, then usually that leaves 2 steps left, settlement and closing. And oftentimes, a lot of people think they're one and the same, but they're not. Trevor, do you mind sharing the difference between a settlement and closing?
Yeah, settlement, in a nutshell, settlement is when everybody goes down to the title company to sign the paperwork. Okay? Closing doesn't happen until the transaction is recorded at the county and ownership changes. So I might go sign paperwork on a Tuesday, but because we're waiting for money to come from lenders, money to transfer from one title company to another title company. Once they get all the money in the right places, they have to record with the county. So if it happens too late in the day, guess what? It's going to happen the next morning. I don't like to have settlements on Fridays, or some cases even in Thursdays, because that means we might end up going over the whole weekend. I don't like that at all. One thing I would tell a buyer and a seller is do not move before it is recorded ownership. And the biggest reason for that, it's not moving plans and trucks and things like that, it's insurance, okay? If you move all your stuff into a house on a Friday and something odd happens and there's a water leak or a fire, your stuff, everything you own, could end up not being covered because the house isn't recorded into your name yet. So you want to talk with your insurance professional. I would say the safest thing is wait until you own it before you move in. And if you're a seller, don't let a buyer move in until they own it, because you're liable. It's still your property.
That's some great advice, Trevor. Thank you. All right, guys, we are going to take a commercial break, but when we get back, you are not going to want to miss this, because if you've ever thought about fixing and flipping homes, then we've got the perfect guest, and we're going to come back and talk about how to fix and flip houses 101. Thank you, Mohammed. Kick it. Hi, I'm Yoshi Shiraki, the author of the book, My Body's Just For Me. The book written for children to educate children on the prevention of child abuse. With the assistance of the multiple-time best-selling author, Richard Paul Evans, we were able to publish this book as a tool to help break the ice in an easy and innocent way to help children understand and learn how to speak up and communicate. I have been invited numerous times onto Good Things Utah to discuss the importance of good communication with your child in regards to abuse, and also to discuss how the book, My Body's Just For Me, is a great tool for every parent when having that tricky conversation with their children. For more information on the book, My Body's Just For Me, please visit www.protectourangels.com today. And remember, the more we focus on prevention, the less we will have to focus on rehabilitation. All right, guys, you are listening to K-Talk Radio. We've got Trevor Thompson here as our guest. You are listening to the show Utah Home Sweet Home. I am your host, Yoshi Shiraki. And, you know, one of the things that I think is so valuable with our guest today is he's an expert fix and flipper. I mean, this guy is more professional than anyone you've seen on TV. And, you know, I know a lot of people that want to get into that fixing and flipping the fixing and flipping industry, the business. You see it on the television shows. And, you know, I happen to fix and flip myself. Trevor does far more volume than I do. And so I want to take this opportunity to ask Trevor some questions. Basic flipping 101 questions that some of you might be able to get benefit from if you've ever thought about, you know, maybe flipping a home you inherited. You know, you inherit grandma's house and now you're thinking, hey, let's remodel this and get top dollar. Or maybe your next door neighbor's house is for sale and it's, you know, possibly a foreclosure, let's just say, and in need of lots of repair. And so, Trevor, let's dive into this. Would you please share with our listeners, you know, your basic formula that you use on knowing if this property will be a good fix and flip, because it's based off the numbers. You know, how much it's going to cost to buy, how much it's going to cost to fix, and how much can you sell it for. So for those people that don't have a formula that they, you know, refer to, what formula do you refer to?
Well, fixing and flipping is something that sounds very sexy. Everybody wants to do it. Everyone's watched HGTV. They think it's great, right?
Yep.
And the thing is, there's a lot more work than most people realize actually go into it, okay? This year in 2019, I looked at my board yesterday, we have purchased 30 houses and we're in September, Okay?
Fantastic.
We still own 15 of those 30 properties, okay? And those are all in the process of remodel, listing, or somewhere along the way where in a couple of cases my sellers have not moved out of the home yet because we worked an arrangement with them, okay? So with numbers, I can tell you basic numbers. I want to buy something that whatever I can sell it for. Let's say I can sell a house for $200,000. I want to buy it at 80% of that minus the cost of repairs. And then I feel fairly comfortable that whatever comes up, I'm not going to have challenges with being profitable. But the truth is, there's a lot of gray area. Okay, there's a lot of things that if you've seen it before and you know how to deal with it, there's leeway in that number. Okay? So really what it comes down to is we always want to buy it as low as we can get, and we want to sell it for as much as we can get. That's the simple idea. But in my experience, my best, most profitable deals have always come from one that's unexpected. And it's something that I've gone in and I've worked with the seller and we fit their needs and we give them a solid offer that they're happy with, okay? And for me, it feels like it's a base hit. But then due to circumstances or something that happens after, sometimes even out of my control, something will happen that makes that deal way better than I thought it was, okay? For instance, I bought a house in Salt Lake, west side of Salt Lake City proper, I believe, just south of North Temple and on the west side of I-15. And this is a property that it was in very poor condition. The numbers worked okay for a decent little remodel, but as we got into it, it was a lot more work than we thought it was before we bought the house, and we started to get really nervous that, wow, we could possibly lose money on this deal, okay? Well, I brought it up at an investors meeting, a networking meeting with, probably 75 people in the room. I just said, hey, I have this address, I'd be open to selling this property. Not really expecting to get anybody off of it, but it's something to talk about, something that people see, oh, he's doing business, right?
Yep.
So I brought up this property. I was in the position where I had to decide what to do it. But after the meeting, I had two guys come down that I know pretty well. They came down and they told me that they were interested in that property. Not only were they interested, but they were willing to pay a good amount more than what I bought the property for. So immediately I'm thinking, okay, what do these guys know that I don't know, right? Well, this is what happened. They purchased the property from me at a price that I was very happy to sell it to them, okay? This area is in an area of Salt Lake that is open to zoning changes for higher density, which means you can put more units on a property than just a single family house. So their plan was they were going to take this little property and turn it into 4 townhomes, okay? Which is a lot more valuable project than just remodeling one house. What they did in addition to that was they actually went and contacted the neighbors. In fact, these are the same neighbors that I had spoken to already and asked them if they were willing to sell. They weren't ready to sell when I talked to them, but when these guys talked to them, they were more open to the idea. So they ended up buying the property next door to it, doubled the size of their lot, doubled the units that they can put on it. So now they're looking at a minimum of about 8 townhome units on this land, which, it was a very good deal for me, and it's an even better deal for them because they looked at it from a different perspective.
Absolutely. Very cool. Very cool. Trevor, not everybody has an unlimited budget. So let's just say somebody has a limited budget and they're not going to be able to remodel the whole entire house. Where do you think they should focus their budget?
Now, by budget, I'm assuming that you not only mean cash that they have available, but they also mean like they don't want to overspend and lose money on the house, right?
Correct.
Okay, because there's 2 perspectives. I would say being clean is the most important thing. So if you can be clean and fix major problems, I would focus in that situation on FHA required items. If I can sell a property and get an FHA loan, these are things that are outside the house. You can't have any raw exposed wood. You need paint or something to cover wood so it doesn't deteriorate with weather. Plumbing, electrical issues. If you can make the property safe, health and safety, even if it's not a full remodel, chances are you can still sell that property really quickly to someone who's looking for a starter home or a remodel themselves.
Wonderful. Trevor, thank you so much for coming in today. You know, I really value your information. As you know, I call you all the time, you know, to bounce ideas off of you anyway. So I thought it was very fitting and perfect to have you on the show today. Is there anything that you need, you know, that our listeners right now might be able to assist you with in any way, shape, or form?
Yeah. I'm always looking to buy properties. If there's an opportunity that you think there's an opportunity to make money, or you've got somebody who's in a situation where they just need to sell, I would love to hear from you. I can be contacted at, I'll give my phone number over the air if that's okay.
Yeah,
Okay,
please.
it's 801-712-4797. Trevor Thompson. I'm with Equity Real Estate. I am licensed, but you know, I can look at a property and give you an idea. Even if you're just looking for advice, I'm happy to go look at properties because it gives me an opportunity to see something new also.
Awesome. Now, earlier you had also shared with me that you're looking to grow your company and you have some needs for building that team. Do you want to share a little bit about that?
Yeah. I'm looking right now for a real estate licensed personal assistant that can help me and learn the business as a project manager. I'm absolutely looking for that. I spoke with one yesterday, but we haven't hired anybody yet. Okay, and I actually have an appointment on Monday to talk to another. So if you have an interest in this and you are licensed, I'd love to hear from you.
Wonderful. What are you thinking they would do for you? Just so people have an idea. Someone who's licensed out there, they're listening to this and they want to get into the learning how to do fix and flips.
Yeah, an assistant that works with me is going to be able to see the entire process of flipping houses right here in Salt Lake County, or you know, Davis, Weber. We have a lot of property up there right now. They're going to be able to see the process hands-on, and you know, eventually they'll become an expert in sales, negotiation, flipping, remodeling, all the things that I do.
Wonderful. Well, Trevor, thank you so much for coming in. I also want to share with you guys, if you tuned in late for this show, you can watch the videos and listen to the podcast later on our social media platforms. Just go to www.utahhomesweethome.com and you'll see links at the top right hand corner for our Facebook, for our YouTube, where we'll be placing this content. And if you wanted to reach out, you can contact me at 801-810-4475. And my email address is ys for Yoshi Shiraki, ys@utahhomesweethome.com. Thanks so much for listening. Trevor, thanks, buddy. I appreciate it. Yeah, it's awesome.
And you're all good.
All right, guys, I hope you enjoyed listening to Trevor. And if you want to watch this, if you missed any part of it, you can tune in later to our social media. Thanks, guys.